"Kiss me like you mean it," the billionaire CEO said. Her fake girlfriend returned the ring. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's emotional story about two women discovering that sometimes the love we never planned for becomes the love that changes us most, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It takes only a moment, it is completely free, and your support allows us to keep bringing you heartfelt, dramatic, and unforgettable stories about courage, second chances, healing, and love between women. Every subscription, every comment, and every moment you spend with these stories truly means the world to us. And before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel and how many people around the world are listening together. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let us return to our main character, and to the moment when a billionaire woman who believed she could control almost everything discovered that the one thing she wanted most could never be bought. The strangest thing about having enough money to buy almost anything is discovering how many things refuse to be bought. I learned that lesson at 44, though on the night my life began to change, I still believed the opposite. My name is Claire Harrington, CEO of Harrington Meridian Group, and that Thursday evening I signed an $800 million acquisition without spilling a drop of champagne. Cameras flashed across the ballroom of a downtown Chicago hotel, while investors shook my hand and reporters called me brilliant, fearless, unstoppable. I smiled exactly when expected. I remembered every important name. I answered every question without hesitation. Control had always been my greatest talent. 3 hours later, I stood barefoot in my penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, holding a slice of birthday cake I hadn't asked for, and realized there was nobody I wanted to call. The silence felt different after a room full of applause. Down on Michigan Avenue, headlights moved through the city like tiny rivers of white and red. 44 floors above them, everything around me looked immaculate. Marble counters, carefully chosen artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture expensive enough that guests were afraid to set down their drinks without coasters. Yet nothing in that apartment seemed to know me. My phone vibrated against the kitchen island. For one foolish second, I hoped it might be someone calling simply because they missed me. It was an email from legal. I laughed quietly. Of course it was. Growing up, my father had taught me that affection was unreliable, but achievement could be measured. A perfect report card earned dinner at my favorite restaurant. Winning a scholarship earned a new car. When I became the youngest executive in our family's company, he finally told me he was proud of me. I spent the next 20 years making sure I never needed anyone to say it again. If people wanted money, I understood them. If they wanted promotions, contracts, introductions, opportunities, I understood them too. Every relationship had terms, whether people admitted it or not. At least that was what I believed. The following morning, my communications director, Lauren, entered my office carrying a folder and the expression people wore when they had volunteered to deliver bad news to a billionaire. "The Whitmore investors are nervous," she said. "About the acquisition? About you." I looked up. "I'm the reason this acquisition exists." "Exactly." She explained that the family-controlled investment group backing our expansion admired my results but questioned whether I understood the community-centered brand we were acquiring. Apparently, recent profiles had described me as cold, isolated, and obsessed with growth. "One article actually called you emotionally inaccessible," Lauren added. "Efficient," I corrected. She almost smiled. Then she closed the folder. "They want to see a human being, Claire, not just a balance sheet." I turned toward the window, irritated by how personal the criticism felt. "And how exactly do you propose we manufacture humanity?" Lauren hesitated, then said the sentence I should have laughed at. "What you need is a girlfriend." I didn't laugh. Instead, I looked at her reflection in the glass, and somewhere beneath the calculations already forming in my mind, something unfamiliar stirred. By lunchtime, I had convinced myself that love, like everything else, could probably be negotiated. I had no idea I was about to meet the one woman who would prove me wrong. By Monday morning, I had almost convinced myself that Lauren's suggestion had been ridiculous. Then I met Emily Carter. Our first encounter happened at the Lakeside Renewal Center, a century-old brick building on Chicago's north side that Harrington Meridian planned to acquire as part of a redevelopment project. I arrived expecting architects, attorneys, and a predictable presentation. Instead, I found a woman in faded jeans standing in the middle of an unfinished community room, arguing with my development director about a wall. "You cannot remove it," she said. "It is structurally unnecessary," he replied. "So is kindness, technically. I still recommend keeping that." I stopped walking. She had light brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, paint on one sleeve, and absolutely no idea that the woman standing 10 feet behind her controlled the company purchasing the property. "Why does the wall matter?" I asked. She turned. Her eyes met mine without recognition or nervousness. "Because 12 women painted it together," she said. "They were rebuilding their lives, and this was the first place some of them felt useful again." My director cleared his throat. "Emily, this is Claire Harrington." Something changed in her expression, but not in the way I expected. No sudden smile, no apology. She simply extended her hand. "Then you are the person I need to convince." Her handshake was warm and steady. I looked toward the wall. It was covered with hand-painted leaves, each containing a name or a short message. "Begin again. Keep going. You belong here." I had spent my career evaluating property by square footage, revenue potential, and projected return. Emily apparently measured walls by memories. "What exactly do you do here?" I asked. "My studio designed the renovation," she said. "We also donate part of our time to the center." "Donate?" The word escaped before I could soften my surprise. Emily smiled. "Yes, Claire. Some things happen without invoices." I should have been offended. Instead, I nearly laughed. During the next hour, she challenged 3 assumptions in our redevelopment plan and offered solutions that were cheaper than ours. That interested me. What interested me more was how she spoke to everyone exactly the same way, whether they were executives or volunteers carrying folding chairs. Before leaving, I asked for the name of her company, Carter Studio. "I could acquire it," I said. Emily blinked. "Excuse me? You are talented. Harrington Meridian could give you resources, staff, better offices, national clients." I expected curiosity. Everyone was curious when enough money entered the conversation. Emily picked up her notebook. "No, thank you." I stared at her. "You have not heard an offer. I do not need to." Then she walked away. Lauren, who had accompanied me, appeared beside my shoulder. "I think that is the first person I have ever seen refuse you before you named a number. She is impractical." "You are smiling." I immediately stopped. Outside, photographers waited near the entrance because someone had leaked my visit. Emily emerged behind me, just as a reporter shouted a question about the acquisition. Another asked who she was. Emily looked startled, so I instinctively guided her away from the crowd and toward my waiting car. Cameras flashed. By the time I reached my office 25 minutes later, the photographs were already online. One headline called Emily my mysterious companion. Another wondered whether Chicago's most private chief executive officer had finally found someone special. Lauren placed her tablet on my desk. "This is becoming interesting." I should have ordered our public relations team to correct the story immediately. Instead, I stared at a photograph of Emily looking at me, as though my last name meant nothing at all. Then I remembered the nervous investors, the acquisition, and Lauren's outrageous suggestion. A solution assembled itself with dangerous simplicity. "Find out whether Carter Studio is having financial trouble," I said. Lauren's smile disappeared. "Claire, what are you thinking?" I looked once more at Emily's photograph. "I am thinking about making her an offer she will definitely want to refuse." Emily called me at 8:12 the next morning, and she did not bother with hello. "Whatever you are planning, the answer is no." I leaned back in my office chair, looking through the glass walls at employees moving across the 42nd floor. "That is impressive. I have not made the offer yet." "Your assistant asked whether I could meet you privately." Billionaire chief executive officers do not usually schedule private meetings with small business owners because they suddenly want decorating advice. Despite myself, I smiled. 10 o'clock, my office. 9:30, I have a client at 11. She hung up before I could respond. At 9:28, Emily walked into my conference room carrying a canvas tote bag and a paper cup of coffee. No designer clothes, no nervous glance at the skyline, no visible interest in the room where deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars had been negotiated. She sat across from me and said, "You have 15 minutes. I slid a folder toward her. 8 weeks. Public events, several dinners, 2 charity functions, and 1 weekend conference. We appear to be dating." Emily stared at me. For several seconds, the only sound was the quiet hum of the ventilation system. Then she laughed, not politely, actually laughed. "You want to hire me to be your girlfriend? Pretend girlfriend. That clarification does not improve it." I explained the investor problem, the photographs, and the convenient public assumption that had already formed around us. I told her there would be clear boundaries and complete discretion. Finally, I named the compensation. Her amusement disappeared. I noticed her fingers tighten around the coffee cup. Lauren had discovered that Carter Studio was 3 months behind on rent after Emily refused to abandon several nonprofit projects. The amount I offered could erase that problem and give her business breathing room for a year. I expected that fact to win. Instead, Emily pushed the folder back. "No, you need the money." Her expression cooled. The instant I said it, I knew I had made a mistake. "Needing money does not mean I am for sale, Claire." The words landed harder than they should have. I lowered my voice. "I did not mean that." "Maybe not, but you are used to solving uncomfortable situations by putting numbers beside them." She stood, and for the first time in years, I found myself wanting someone to remain in a room after they had decided to leave. "The Lakeside Renewal Center," I said. Emily stopped. "What about it?" "The redevelopment plan can preserve the community program and the mural." She turned slowly. "Is that part of the payment?" "No." I surprised myself with the answer. It should have been protected anyway. Something in her face softened. Not enough to become trust, but enough for her to sit again. She opened the folder and read every page. Then she removed a pen from her tote bag. "I have conditions." "Of course you do. My studio stays mine. You do not interfere with my clients, my finances, or my decisions. You do not buy my building. You do not secretly solve problems I have not asked you to solve." I almost smiled at the specificity. "Anything else?" Emily looked directly at me. "Yes, you do not get to buy my decisions." For reasons I could not explain, I stopped smiling. Agreed. We spent the next hour rewriting the arrangement. Our first public appearance would be a museum fundraiser that Friday. Before Emily left, Lauren entered carrying a small velvet box. "For the photographs," she explained. Inside was a simple diamond ring, elegant enough to suggest commitment without inviting questions about an engagement. Emily looked at me. "Seriously? Public relations likes details." She slipped the ring onto her finger, then held up her hand. Something strange tightened in my chest. It was only a prop, only 8 weeks, only another agreement with signatures, obligations, and an ending date. That was why I should have felt relieved. Instead, as Emily walked toward the elevator wearing a ring I had paid for, I heard her condition again. "You do not get to buy my decisions." The elevator doors closed, and for the first time, I wondered whether I had just signed a contract containing the one promise I did not know how to keep. Friday evening arrived with freezing rain tapping against the windows of my penthouse, and I spent 20 minutes telling myself that the unusual tension in my stomach was about the investors. Then Emily stepped out of the elevator, and that explanation became difficult to believe. She wore a simple midnight blue dress, understated and elegant, with the diamond ring from our agreement catching the light when she lifted her hand. "You are staring," she said. "I am evaluating whether this looks convincing." "Of course you are." She smiled. "For 1 second, I almost thought you were going to say I looked nice. You look beautiful." The words came out before I could reconsider them. Emily blinked, and suddenly neither of us seemed to know where to look. 20 minutes later, we entered the museum fundraiser together beneath a storm of camera flashes. I had attended hundreds of events like this. Normally, I could cross a ballroom while remembering names, calculating alliances, and identifying potential problems before they reached me. That night, I kept noticing Emily. She remembered the bartender's name. She asked a nervous young volunteer about college. When an elderly donor told a story everyone else had heard before, Emily listened as though it mattered. I began to understand why people relaxed around her. More unsettling, I began to understand why I did too. Claire Harrington. The voice belonged to Charles Whitmore, whose family investment group held enormous influence over our acquisition. His eyes moved toward Emily. And this must be the mysterious woman everyone in Chicago suddenly wants to know about. Emily extended her hand. Emily Carter. How long have you two been together? There it was, the question we had rehearsed. Long enough to know Claire hates being late, Emily answered easily. I do not hate being late. You arrived 7 minutes early tonight. Charles laughed, but his daughter Rebecca studied us with uncomfortable precision. You seem very different, she said. We are, Emily replied. That is probably why it works. Her answer was perfect, yet Rebecca remained unconvinced. Forgive me, but Claire has guarded her private life for years. Then suddenly there are photographs, interviews, and a ring. My pulse quickened. Emily's fingers found mine. It was part of the performance, I reminded myself. Then Rebecca smiled. You do not even look at each other like a couple. I should have changed the subject. I should have made a joke. Instead, pride and panic made the decision for me. I leaned closer to Emily and whispered, Kiss me like you mean it. Her eyes widened. For half a second, I thought she would refuse. Then she looked at me with an expression so calm that the ballroom seemed to fade around us. She touched my cheek and kissed me gently. Nothing dramatic, nothing inappropriate, just a brief, tender kiss that somehow felt more honest than anything I had said all evening. When we separated, I forgot about Charles. I forgot about Rebecca. I even forgot why we were pretending. Emily remembered first. She turned back toward our audience and smiled. Convincing enough? Rebecca laughed and raised her champagne glass. The conversation moved on, but I could not. Later, inside the quiet limousine, Chicago lights slid across the windows, while several inches of space between Emily and me felt strangely enormous. Neither of us spoke for nearly 5 minutes. I watched her turn the ring slowly around her finger. Emily, do not. Do not what? She finally looked at me. Explain it like a business decision. I had no answer. She turned toward the window, then asked softly, Was that still part of the contract? Every instinct I had developed over 20 years told me to say yes. It was safer, clearer, controlled. But when I opened my mouth, the lie would not come. Emily waited. The city moved around us, and for the first time in my adult life, silence frightened me more than the truth. I never answered Emily in the limousine, and somehow that silence followed me for the next 3 weeks. Our arrangement continued exactly as scheduled, but almost nothing between us felt scheduled anymore. There were charity dinners, photographs outside restaurants, and carefully timed appearances, yet the moments I remembered happened when nobody was watching. One Tuesday evening, Emily came to my penthouse after a community fundraiser and found me standing at the kitchen island with my laptop open beside an untouched takeout container. Is that dinner? She asked. Technically. She looked inside. Claire, this chicken has given up hope. 20 minutes later, she was making grilled cheese sandwiches while I searched my own cabinets for tomato soup. I could negotiate international acquisitions, but apparently I did not know where my housekeeper kept canned food. Emily laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. I should have been embarrassed. Instead, I laughed with her. We ate at the kitchen island without photographers, assistants, or expensive champagne. She told me about Carter's studio and why she spent so much time at the Lakeside Renewal Center. Years earlier, her mother had lost nearly everything after a difficult divorce and had been forced to rebuild her life from a small apartment with donated furniture. Someone helped her make that place feel like home, Emily said. I was 16. I never forgot what dignity looked like when someone gave it back without making her feel indebted. Her words stayed with me. Is that why you help women at the center? Partly. She studied me over the rim of her coffee mug. Why do you work so much? Because I am good at it. That was not my question. I looked toward the windows. Snow had started falling over Chicago, softening the lights below. I told her about my father, about achievement being the closest thing our family had to affection, about birthdays that became business dinners and vacations interrupted by conference calls. I expected sympathy. Emily gave me something more uncomfortable, understanding. That sounds lonely, she said. 2 words. No judgment. My throat tightened unexpectedly. You get used to it. Getting used to something does not make it good. I looked at her, and the room became strangely quiet. For one dangerous second, I wanted to tell her that the penthouse had stopped feeling empty when she was inside it. Instead, I asked whether she wanted more coffee. There she is, Emily murmured. Who? The chief executive officer who appears whenever Claire gets scared. I almost denied it, but she was smiling gently. A few days later, I visited Lakeside without telling my staff. I found Emily helping a woman named Susan choose colors for a tiny apartment she had recently rented. Emily held up 2 paint samples. Which one feels like you? Susan hesitated. Does it matter? Emily answered immediately. Of course it matters. You are the one who has to wake up there every morning. Something about that sentence unsettled me. Emily never decided for people. She helped them see that their choices mattered. That evening, we walked nearly half a mile through cold Chicago air to a neighborhood coffee shop because Emily refused my driver's offer. Our shoulders occasionally brushed beneath the narrow umbrella. Neither of us moved farther apart. When we reached her building, she glanced at the diamond ring still on her finger. I forgot I was wearing it today. I should have reminded her that public appearances required consistency. Instead, I asked, "Did you want to take it off?" Emily looked at me for a long moment. "Did you want me to?" My answer came too slowly. She smiled, almost sadly, and stepped toward the entrance. "Good night, Claire." "Emily?" She turned. There were a dozen things I could have said. Stay. The kiss was real. This is becoming real. But fear translated all of them into something safer. Thursday dinner is at 7. Her expression changed just enough for me to notice. "Of course," she said. "It is on the schedule." The door closed behind her, leaving me alone beneath the umbrella. For the first time, I understood that our contract was not protecting me from getting hurt. It was protecting me from admitting that I already cared. The first sign that I was about to ruin everything arrived in an email at 6:14 on Monday morning. Carter Studio had received notice that its building would be sold, and Emily had 60 days to negotiate a new lease with whoever bought it. I learned this because Lauren forwarded a property report connected to our redevelopment research. I read the message twice, then called our real estate division before I had even finished my coffee. By 9 o'clock, I knew the asking price. By noon, one of my holding companies had submitted an offer. By Wednesday, the building was effectively mine. I told myself I had protected Emily. That was the problem. I never once asked whether she wanted protecting. Thursday evening, she arrived at my penthouse carrying 2 grocery bags and wearing the diamond ring. "I decided your kitchen deserves another chance," she said. "Tonight, I am teaching you how to make pasta without an executive assistant." For an hour, I almost forgot what I had done. We cooked together while snow drifted beyond the windows. Emily teased me for measuring olive oil too precisely. I accused her of treating recipes like suggestions. When she laughed, the penthouse felt warmer than any place I remembered living. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. "It is my landlord." I stopped moving. Emily answered. I watched confusion replace her smile. Then confusion became disbelief. Her eyes slowly found mine. "Yes," she said into the phone. "I understand." When the call ended, she placed the phone carefully on the counter. "Did you buy my building?" There were moments in business when hesitation could cost millions. This hesitation cost something more important. Technically, a Harrington Meridian holding company purchased it. Emily stared at me. "Claire, your lease was at risk. Now it is not. You promised." I solved the problem. The moment I said those words, I heard how wrong they sounded. Emily stepped away from the counter. "No, you purchased the problem. The previous owner was going to sell anyway. That is not the point. Then tell me what the point is." Her voice remained calm, which somehow made every word heavier. "You never asked what I wanted." I felt myself retreat toward the language I understood. Numbers, risk, solutions. Your studio employs 6 people. You have non-profit commitments. Losing that location could have damaged everything you built. I know what was at stake. It is my life. I was trying to help you. Emily looked down at the ring on her hand. Helping someone is not the same as deciding for them. The kitchen suddenly seemed too large. I thought about Susan at Lakeside choosing paint for her apartment. "Which one feels like you?" Emily had asked her. "Not which one is cheapest, not which one is smartest. Which one do you choose?" I finally understood why that moment had stayed with me. "I am sorry," I said. Emily looked surprised, perhaps because apologies did not come naturally to me. "I mean it. I should have asked." Her expression softened, but she did not smile. "You should have trusted me enough to handle my own life." "I do trust you." "Then start acting like it." She picked up her coat. I wanted to ask her to stay. Instead, fear reached for the safest thing available. "We have the Whitmore meeting Tuesday." Emily closed her eyes briefly. "There is always another meeting with you." Then she left. The groceries remained on the counter, dinner unfinished. I stood alone beside 2 plates we never used, and realized money had done exactly what I had always trusted it to do. It had removed uncertainty. It had secured the building. It had protected the studio. And it had sent Emily walking out my door. The next morning, I instructed legal to prepare options that would remove my control over her lease. I believed an apology and a corrected contract could repair the damage. I still had not learned the hardest lesson. Some mistakes cannot be fixed by paperwork, especially when the next mistake is already waiting for you. Tuesday morning arrived beneath a pale Chicago sky, and I walked into the Whitmore meeting believing I had prepared for every possible question except the one that mattered. Emily had agreed to attend because our contract still had 3 weeks remaining, but she arrived separately and spoke to me only when necessary. The diamond ring was still on her finger. Somehow that made the distance between us hurt more. "After today," I told her quietly outside the conference room, "I want to talk about the building." Emily adjusted the folder in her hands. "After today." I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her legal was preparing a way to remove Harrington Meridian from controlling her lease. Instead, the doors opened, and Claire Harrington, the chief executive officer, replaced Claire Harrington, the woman who was terrified of losing someone. 12 board members waited around a polished walnut table. Charles Whitmore sat near the center, while Rebecca watched me with the same perceptive expression she had worn at the museum. The first 40 minutes went perfectly. Revenue projections, community commitments, expansion schedules, numbers were easy. Then Rebecca closed her presentation packet. "Before we vote, there is one concern." I knew immediately. "Your relationship with Emily Carter has become inseparable from the public narrative surrounding this acquisition," she continued. "Now your company has purchased the building containing her business. Investors are asking whether personal feelings are influencing corporate decisions." My heartbeat accelerated. This was the moment. I could tell them Emily had challenged me, changed my thinking, and made our community strategy better. I could admit that somewhere along the way, what began as an arrangement had become something I could no longer describe with contractual language. Instead, I looked around the table and saw $800 million balanced against one frightening truth. I chose control. "Emily was part of a temporary arrangement," I said. The room became painfully quiet. Nothing more. Rebecca's expression changed. Charles nodded as though I had provided exactly the reassurance he wanted. But through the glass wall behind him, I saw Emily standing in the hallway. She had heard me. Our eyes met for less than a second. Then she turned and walked toward the elevators. I finished the meeting because that was what I had trained myself to do. 47 minutes later, the preliminary vote passed. Everyone congratulated me. I felt nothing. That evening, Emily came to my penthouse. She did not remove her coat. She did not sit down. She simply crossed the room and stopped in front of me. "Emily, what I said in there was cowardly." Yes. There was no anger in her voice. That was worse. "I was afraid the deal would collapse." "I know. What we have is not nothing." Her eyes softened for one painful moment. "Then why was nothing the word you chose when telling the truth might have cost you something?" I had negotiated with people who spent entire careers searching for weaknesses. None had ever found mine as quickly as Emily did. She looked down and slowly removed the diamond ring. "This was supposed to be a prop," she said. "I know." At some point, I stopped thinking of it that way. She placed it in my palm and gently folded my fingers around it. The small circle suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The contract said I return it when this ends. "Emily, please." "That is the problem, Claire. It became real. I could barely speak. Then do not end it. She looked at me with tears brightening her eyes, but her voice remained steady. I cannot stay somewhere I am cherished in private and erased when the room becomes important. Then she walked toward the elevator. Every instinct screamed at me to offer something, promise something, fix something, but for once, I understood that stopping her would only be another attempt to control her choice. The elevator doors opened. Emily stepped inside. Before they closed, she looked at me one last time. I stood there holding the ring, surrounded by everything money had given me, finally understanding the price of the one thing money could never guarantee. For the first time in my career, I did not chase what was leaving me. I stood in the silent penthouse after Emily was gone, the diamond ring resting in my palm, and understood that respecting her choice meant accepting a possibility I hated. She might never come back. The next morning, I arrived at Harrington Meridian before sunrise. Chicago was still dark beyond my office windows when I called Lauren and our general counsel into the conference room. "Terminate the agreement with Emily," I said. "Immediately. No penalties, no remaining obligations, and transfer every dollar she already earned." Lauren studied me carefully. "And the building?" That question hurt, because I finally understood why my first solution had been wrong. Create an independent community trust. Carter Studio receives the same tenant protections as everyone else. Emily gets no special obligation to me, and I get no control over her lease. Our attorney began listing complications. Normally, I would have interrupted him. This time I listened. By Friday, the documents were complete. I signed them without contacting Emily. That was harder than signing away money. Part of me wanted her to know what I had done. A larger part was beginning to understand that an apology performed for applause was simply another transaction. The following Monday, the Whitmore board requested a final meeting. I entered alone. No Emily beside me. No carefully manufactured image. No ring. Rebecca noticed immediately. "Where is Miss Carter?" "Living her life," I said. Charles frowned. "We were under the impression the public concern had been resolved." "It has. Just not the way I told you." I placed a folder on the table, but for once I did not open it. Emily was part of an arrangement. That statement was true. What I said afterward was not. Silence settled over the room. My pulse was loud enough that I could hear it. She became important to me, and instead of admitting that, I reduced her to a business strategy because I was afraid honesty might jeopardize this deal. Charles leaned back. "Are you telling us personal feelings affected corporate judgment?" "I am telling you my need for control affected my judgment." I explained the building purchase, the trust, and the safeguards I had ordered. Then I said something the old Claire Harrington would never have allowed into a boardroom. Emily did not make me weaker. She made me notice where I was already weak. Rebecca's expression softened. Charles did not look pleased. "You understand this admission could cost you our support." "Yes." "And you are prepared to lose $800 million over this?" I thought about Emily asking whether choices mattered. I thought about Susan choosing paint for a small apartment because someone had reminded her that her opinion still belonged to her. I am prepared to lose a deal rather than keep becoming someone I no longer respect. The meeting ended without a decision. I returned to my office expecting panic. Instead, I felt strangely calm. 2 days later, Lauren entered carrying the final vote. "They are staying," she said. I stared at her. "Why?" "Rebecca convinced enough of them that accountability is better evidence of leadership than perfection." I should have celebrated. Instead, I looked at the ring inside my desk drawer. "Do not issue a statement connecting Emily to the decision." Lauren smiled faintly. "You really are changing." 3 weeks passed. I did not call Emily. I did not send flowers. I did not manufacture an accidental meeting. I went to work, attended counseling for the first time in my life, and began asking questions before offering solutions. Then, one snowy Saturday morning, I visited Lakeside Renewal Center. The mural was still there. Beneath one painted leaf, someone had added 4 simple words: "Love leaves room for choice." I stood before them for a long time. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "I wondered when you would finally understand that wall." I turned. Emily stood 10 feet away, holding 2 cups of coffee, and there was no ring on her hand. Emily held out one of the coffee cups, and for several seconds I simply stared at it. "It is black," she said. "No sugar." I remembered. I accepted it carefully. "Thank you." Snow drifted beyond the tall windows of the Lakeside Renewal Center, turning the Chicago morning quiet and white. 3 months earlier, I would have filled the silence with explanations. That morning I waited. Emily looked toward the mural. "I heard about the community trust. I did not do it so you would hear about it." I know. Those 2 words meant more than praise ever had. We walked through the center together, passing rooms where volunteers arranged donated furniture, and families discussed new beginnings over coffee. Eventually, Emily stopped beside a window. "Why did you never call me?" I looked down at my cup. "Because you asked to leave, and I finally understood that loving someone does not give me permission to overrule them." Her eyes met mine. "That must have been difficult for you." "Extremely." She smiled, and I felt something inside me loosen. "I spent most of my life believing uncertainty was a problem," I continued. "If I could control the terms, I thought I could control the outcome. Then you came along and refused to follow any of my rules. I followed some. You rewrote half of them. They needed improvement." I laughed. It felt good to hear her laugh with me. Then the moment softened. "Emily, I am sorry for what I said in that meeting. Not because I lost you afterward. I am sorry because you deserve to be acknowledged when acknowledging you required courage from me." She looked away briefly. "That hurt. I know. And I cannot pretend it did not. I am not asking you to." I took a breath. This was the part no contract could prepare me for. "I do not want you to owe me forgiveness. I do not want gratitude. I do not even want an answer today. I just want the chance to know you again, if that is something you choose." Emily studied my face for a long moment. "And if I say no?" Once, that question would have terrified me. Now I understood why the answer mattered. "Then I will respect it." Her eyes grew bright. She nodded slowly. "Coffee," she said. "What?" "You can start with coffee." I smiled. "I can do coffee." We started again without contracts, photographers, or promises we had not earned. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became Sunday walks along Lake Michigan. Weeks became months. I learned to ask before helping. Emily learned that my silence did not always mean distance. Sometimes it meant I was finally listening. Nearly a year after that snowy morning, I brought her back to Lakeside. The mural had grown, filled with new leaves and new messages from people rebuilding their lives. I carried no lawyers, no cameras, and no carefully prepared speech, only a small velvet box. Emily saw it and immediately looked at me. "Claire." "This is not the old ring," I noticed. I opened the box but kept it in my own hands. The first ring came with terms. "This one comes with a question, and every possible answer belongs to you." Her eyes filled with tears as she smiled. "That might be the most romantic thing you have ever said." I practiced. "Of course you did." I laughed. Then Emily reached for my hand. "Ask me." So I did. Much later, when I thought about everything that had happened, I realized Emily had never taught me that money was bad or ambition was empty. She taught me something harder. Generosity without respect can become control. Love without freedom can become possession. Real love makes room for another person's voice, boundaries, dreams, and choices. I once believed security meant controlling the outcome. Emily showed me that love begins where control ends. And when she finally chose me freely, I understood why that choice was worth more than anything I could ever buy.